Perfect. Just giving a large Haribol, Hare Krishna to everyone. Welcome. This is See Through. This is our podcast where we kind of help each other navigate spiritual life, where we help each other navigate material life, because at a certain point, the two just become life. And how we help each other see through all of the obstacles and see through some of the different things that we encounter along the way, good and bad, and in between. So we've been reading from Krishna book, and we'll be continuing to read from Krishna book. We are now starting with chapter 1. We had several episodes and a couple of months of the introduction, but now we made it. We're here. And we are ready to embark on this adventure with our Supreme Most Best Friend, get to know him a little bit better. And if we learned anything from the introduction, it's that when we say our Supreme Best Friend, there's like an army of spiritual entities that go along with that. So we'll encounter many, many personalities within this Krishna book, and it's kind of like, well, this person is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's like, well, who's that person? Also the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like, and that person, also Supreme Personality of Godhead, which gives me hope, because if we find ourselves in a situation where we really need that help and that healing, there is a spiritual entity ready to help us and give us the best kind of encouragement. So I am your host. My name is Achyuta Gopi. Good to see you. We are here every Sunday at this time. It's about 10 a.m. It's actually 10:08 New York time. So how awesome are we? So now we can get started with our Krishna book. First, we need a little bit of an invocation to bring in our spiritual teachers, those who are kindly looking after us, guiding us, giving us their spiritual potency. And then we have a magical incantation that'll help transport us to this wonderful, wonderful place, which is the abode of all of these spiritual histories. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Don't we feel that much more ready? I feel equipped now. It's one thing when you're kind of going on a journey and you feel stranded and you're like, I'm on my own on this one. How am I going to make all this work? It's another thing when you invoke the presence of so many spiritual teachers. Then you definitely feel like, oh, I'm not alone. I have other people to captain this ship with. So I feel equipped now. I feel sheltered. So now we can begin. There is the Veda Base online. It's vedabase.io. And you can go there and find the Krishna book if you'd like to read along online. If you have a physical copy of the book, that's great. If you also have a Kindle copy of the book, also wonderful. Basically, join in however you can. So now we can begin. Chapter 1, The Advent of Lord Krishna. Spoiler alert, Krishna does not actually take birth in this chapter. I always thought it was interesting that they named it the Advent of Lord Krishna, but that doesn't happen for another couple of chapters. But we'll get to it. So, chapter 1, the Advent of Lord Krishna. Once, the world was overburdened by the unnecessary defense force of different kings who were actually demons, but were posing themselves as the royal order. This doesn't sound so different than what we have right now. So that just lets us know that this has always been happening. Those times when we think to ourselves, oh, back then they had it so much better, or so much easier, or things were so much more sattvic, which means, they were more pious and more good. No, they were not. This just kind of lets us know that the material world has always been doing this material world thing, because the time frame for this Krishna book, the pastimes of Krishna on an earthly plane of existence, is about 5,000 years ago, and a little bit more than that. So about 5,000 years ago plus. But what they tell you is that the wonderful thing about spiritual histories is they do not work on our concept of time. So there are things that feel cyclical and they feel like they're out of time. And it's like, when exactly did this happen? And it seems like it's just a cycle. Yeah. Spiritual pastimes don't happen according to time. They take the shape of a time only when it comes time for us to try and figure out some way to understand them. Then we have a concept of time that we try to put things in chronological order. Otherwise, they occur according to the will and the whims and the wishes of our Supreme Person. So now the world is overburdened, as it often is. At that time, the whole world became perturbed, and the predominating deity of this earth, known as Bhumi, went to see Lord Brahma to tell of her calamities due to the demoniac kings. Bhumi assumed the shape of a cow and presented herself before Lord Brahma with tears in her eyes. She was bereaved and was weeping just to invoke the Lord's compassion. She related the calamitous position of the earth, and after hearing this, Lord Brahma became much aggrieved, and he at once started for the ocean of milk, where Lord Vishnu resides. Lord Brahma was accompanied by all the demigods, headed by Lord Shiva, and Bhumi also followed. Arriving on the shore of the milk ocean, Lord Brahma began to pacify the Lord Vishnu, who formerly saved the earth planet by assuming the transcendental form of a boar. In the Vedic mantras, there is a particular type of prayer called Purusha Shukta. Generally, the demigods offer their obeisances unto Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by chanting the Purusha Shukta. It is understood herein that the predominating deity of every planet can see the Supreme Lord of this universe, Brahma, whenever there is some disturbance in his planet. And Brahma can approach the Supreme Lord Vishnu not by seeing him directly, but by standing on the shore of the ocean of milk. One thing which is very interesting is there's a line. It is understood herein that the predominating deity of every planet can see the Supreme Lord of this universe, Brahma, whenever there is some disturbance in his planet. Interestingly enough, the Supreme Lord in this sentence is not capitalized, because Brahma is not the ultimate Supreme Lord. He's like one of a supervisor Supreme Lords. And then also, we have whenever there is some disturbance in his planet. However, we hear about the Earth planet, and the predominating deity of the Earth planet is female. So why would we use his? Within the language of Hindi and within Sanskrit language, you don't really get to differentiating between he or she until much later in a sentence, right? If you were to say he or she, the word is the same. There is no separate word, unless you were to specifically say a girl or a boy or female or male. So this his is kind of interchangeable according to the native languages of Srila Prabhupada and these Vedas. So I kind of want to urge us not, like when you see things like that, especially in a spiritual context coming from a Sanskrit derivative language, when they're translating it into English, don't take it personally, because you usually find out in connection with whatever's happening, right? So if there's a verb and there's someone doing something, there you would find out if the person performing it was male or female. But not until then. So I just wanted to like put that out there. Like, don't take it personally. Let's pick up what resonates and not get bogged down by the rest. What I find amazing and wonderful is that anyone can approach their supervisor. If you have a problem, they're like, no, go reach out for help. And Lord Brahma will help you reach out for help. So I feel as though when we see so many occurrences happening in the world, and there are unlimited occurrences happening in the world, and we can feel like, what are we supposed to do? You hear about it all, right? You've got the news and social media, and there's information piling in at breakneck speed. What do we do? Sometimes we can feel like, I'm supposed to pray. That's it. Yes, that's it. In the biggest way. That's it. That's everything. Because when the earth was facing a huge, tremendous trouble, so much so that the predominating deity of the earth herself had to say, okay, look, I can't. I can uphold so much. She's a planet, right? I can bear any heavy burden, but this is too much. She went to her supervisor. And her supervisor took all of the other supervisors and they went to their manager, right? Their supreme manager. But what did they do? They prayed. They offered prayers, which amounted to help. We need help. So when we think about prayer and we think about, that's it, that's all I can do. Yes, that is the best thing you can do. Start there. So don't think that you are not doing enough if all you have in your capacity is the capacity to pray. It's about acknowledging that this requires some action which is above us. It's above our pay grade. As one of my friends rightly said. You know, we have to understand what is our spiritual position, what's our material position. And it's like, you know, if somebody comes to you and they're like, but I need $5,000. Like, I don't have it to give you. I'm sorry. I can talk to somebody higher up, somebody more wealthy than me, but I don't have it to give you. But I can wish and pray for your best wishes. And they're like, but I need $5,000. You're like, I don't have it. I simply don't have it. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It just is, it's acknowledging what our actual position is. So we have to look at what we can do and what we can give and what we can't, especially in a spiritual community and in a spiritual mindset, because sometimes we can think it's our responsibility to try and help every single person in that spiritual community. Sometimes we just don't have the wherewithal. What we do have are prayers. And these prayers, let's see how these prayers shape up and what they bring about. So Brahma can approach the Supreme Lord Vishnu not by seeing him directly, but by standing on the shore of the ocean of milk. There is a planet within this universe called Shwetadweep, and on that planet there is an ocean of milk. It is understood from various Vedic literatures that just as there is an ocean of salt water within this planet, there are various kinds of oceans in other planets. Somewhere there is an ocean of milk. Somewhere there is an ocean of oil. Somewhere there is an ocean of liquor, and many other types of oceans. Purusha Sukta is the standard prayer which the demigods recite to appease the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. Because he is lying on the ocean of milk, he is called Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through whom all the incarnations within this universe appear. I like how Srila Prabhupada is really like, you know, almost nonchalant. Somewhere there's an ocean of milk. Somewhere there's an ocean of oil. Somewhere there's an ocean of liquor. And so many other fantastical, wonderful things. And then he moves on, like, you know, standard. And he has spent 9 previous cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam explaining that there is nothing that we could possibly think up or imagine within our brains that does not already exist somewhere. I remember when my mom told me that and I was little. It was wonderful and terrifying all at the same time. Wonderful because all of the wonderful things that you can imagine, they actually exist somewhere in some universe, because we can't think that our brains are more powerful than the creator of the worlds. And as we look at the different living entities that are just inhabiting this planet, it opens us up to a world greater than we could ever imagine. Right? There are people discovering the depths of the ocean and looking at how bioluminescence is a tool that living entities are using to communicate with one another through realms that we have no knowledge about. But now scientists are trying to just get some realization about it. Things that bigger than we could ever conceive of. So it was wonderful because it opened up a new possibility. As a person who loves their imagination, I happen to live in my imagination so much. And now understanding that, wow, it's so much more vast than I could have even imagined. There are so many more things than I could even have imagined. So what to speak of the things that I have imagined? They're already there. It was terrifying because at the time I had asked her a question. I, was watching a scary movie, and I kind of went to her and I was like, Mom, ghosts and all those things, which they don't really exist, do they? I mean, really. And what she said to me was, she said, well, Srimad Bhagavatam says that there is nothing that you could conceive of in your mind that does not already exist. And I remember thinking, why in the world would you tell a 5-year-old that? Just tell me no. Lie to me for a minute and tell me that it's fine. Tell me that I'm not going to be bothered. But she kind of said that, and then she left it there. So when my own child came to me with this same fear, it was in the context of listening to Krishna stories and hearing about all of these kind of fearful living entities. And she's like, what do we do about that? I said, but, we should remember what it actually says, which is these entities find it so difficult to exist in the place where the holy names are chanted. So I kept telling her, I was like, don't worry, you keep chanting, and that will give you the ultimate and supreme most protection. Because I remembered that as a child, I needed a follow-up to this. All of the best and also most awful things that you could imagine already exist. And it's like, well, how do I continue to maintain my life throughout this situation? We can rely on our dearest friend, and we should, because it says that they find it impossible to exist in the place where we have such spiritual protection. And Bhakti Tirtha Swami, one of my all-time favorite saints of this material existence, he was writing a book called Spiritual Warrior. And then the first volume of it speaks about all of these different phenomenons and how to protect yourself spiritually from psychic attacks, otherworldly attacks. And he says, if you want to make the place where you spend the most time a spiritually charged place, he's like, it helps. Place the images, place the iconography of spiritual people in and around you. So if you ever wondered why I have my two best friends, and also, have more best friends, what you can't see is around the room, there's like more, but it's for this reason. And so it brings our attention to what we are focusing on, what we worship. So when we think about the posters that we put up in our rooms, right? When you're young, it's all the superstars and whatnot that you might idolize. But those are the people that you are actually subconsciously giving your worship to. So I'm always, brought back to this point when people call out other religions and like, well, what about idol worship? I'm like, everybody's doing it though. You might think you're not doing idol worship, but you are. The minute you put up that poster of that superstar, the minute when we think about vision boards, right? Vision boards are supposed to be filled with all of the things that you'd like to focus on and manifest. So when we think about what we're looking at every day, what are we manifesting? What are we devoting ourselves to? What are we actually worshiping? Sometimes there's politicians. Sometimes there's people, and you think, oh my God, I'd never want to be like that person. Like, then you're letting them too much in your life. We can use it to think about what we ingest, not just in a food situation, but what we ingest in terms of social media, what we're letting into our spiritual abode. We have a spiritual abode. We have a little spiritual island right here, and we should be protecting it at all costs. Right? There should be gates. There should be gatekeepers, and there should be vetting. Vet carefully who you let into your space. And even if they're the people close to us, but they harbor too much fear, too much anxiety, too much resentment, too much bitterness, and they can't get free of it. Sometimes we have to understand that, okay, I can't let you too much into my spiritual space. Otherwise, you'll drain me, and what will I be left with? So it is not a bad thing to protect ourselves and to watch over that space, because it is all we have. So, in the same way, these demigods, they get to this spiritual abode with an ocean of milk. And what they tell you about this spiritual abode, just from researching through Srimad Bhagavatam, is that Shweta means white. So Shwetadweep is an island filled with light. But the light is so bright that it almost just looks white and pure. Or Shweta not only means white, but it's a white that is so bright that it looks like it's a place filled with rainbows. The light reflects so much that all you can see almost is just rainbows. It's completely luminescent. This is the place of hope for the universe. So whenever I thought about that, and whenever I thought about having to depict this Shwetadweep in writing, I wanted to try and embody that full essence of what Shwetadweep is. You've got a beacon of light all throughout the universe, and the closer you get, the more colors you see. How amazing and wonderful and mystical is this place? So they stand on the shore of this wonderful, magnificent island. And they actually, when we get into the purports of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Krishna book is a summary study. So sometimes you wind up looking in Srimad Bhagavatam and you see there are like more details. It's like, well, how could we not, why didn't we include all of this? It's because it would take up volumes and volumes of books. And Srila Prabhupada was trying to give us a full picture of this 10th canto. So we see so many different details. They stand on this ocean, on the shore, and they actually see nothing. They don't see Anantashesh. They don't see a wonderful bed, a snake bed, which is constantly moving and undulating and holding the resting place of the Supreme Lord. They don't see anything. But they stay there and they pray. They pray hard. This is where faith comes in. What happens when you go to the place of hope and you're praying for a miracle and you don't actually see anything, but you just have to hope and have that faith that the message will arrive? So when we think about the different situations that we're put in, and you think, I've been praying, but I don't actually see anything. I've been praying, but I'm not actually coming face to face with God. Why should I continue praying? You're not the only one. You're not the only one going and praying and seeing nothing. These demigods, these supervisors of material planets, rulers of worlds, not just of one free nation, right? Rulers of worlds are in the same position that we are when we pray. Should let us know that this cosmic rulership is bigger than you or I. But it also lets us know that we're not alone. Everyone has to operate with this faith. Everyone has to exercise their faith, and they have to keep at it. Otherwise, they don't get the results. If they leave too soon, they don't get an answer. So let's see what answer they actually do get. After all the demigods offered the Purusha Shukta prayer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they apparently heard no response. Ever feel like that? I've been praying, and not only do I see nothing, but I hear nothing. I've gotten nothing back. Why? How? How am I supposed to continue maintaining my life when I've gotten nothing? And I've seen that so much. I get many, many messages, and they say, I've been praying, and I've received nothing in response. Who is this God? The demigods also apparently heard no response. But they continued to have faith. Then Lord Brahma personally sat in meditation, and there was a message transmission from Lord Vishnu to Brahma. Brahma then broadcast the message to the demigods. That is the system of receiving Vedic knowledge. The Vedic knowledge is received first by Brahma from the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the medium of the heart. Wow, how wonderful. This message received through the heart. Krishna can speak to any of us through the heart. As stated in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hrida, the transcendental knowledge of the Vedas was transmitted to Lord Brahma through the heart. Here also, in the same way, only Brahma could understand the message transmitted by Lord Vishnu, and he broadcast it to the demigods for their immediate action. The message was, the Supreme Personality of Godhead will appear on the earth very soon, along with his supreme powerful potencies. And as long as he remains on the earth planet to execute his mission of annihilating the demons and establishing the devotees, the demigods should also remain there to assist him. They should all immediately take birth in the family of the Yadu dynasty, wherein the Lord will also appear in due course of time. The Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, Krishna, personally appeared as the son of Vasudeva. Before he appeared, all the demigods, along with their wives, appeared in different pious families in the world, just to assist the Lord in executing his mission. I've always kind of thought about this and pondered this section. First of all, Brahma receives the message, and then he transmits the message to everybody else. And funny, no one said, why should Brahma receive the message first? Like, why didn't you tell me first, God? Why do I have to hear it secondhand? They were so desperate and ready for an answer that they were just able to accept it hopefully, with hope in their hearts, ready to do whatever was necessary in order to continue carrying out this great miracle that they so desperately needed. So sometimes we have to look at it and really take stock about how we act when we receive the answer to our prayers. Sometimes we look, well, why should the answer come that way? Well, why should the answer be given by some man? Whoa. But is the answer coming? Is it an answer that we needed? So then, take the answer. Take the answered prayer, run with the miracle, and leave the rest. So here, I like I said, I always find it really interesting that no one raised any issue with how the message was transmitted or received. They simply did what was needed to be done. They took up that message and they ran with it. What does our Supreme Friend want us to do? Help him in the mission? Take birth? Do whatever? Great, no problem. There's so much to be done. So I want to adopt a mindset that there's so much to be done in my Krishna consciousness that I don't want to get tripped up by the small details. There's so much to be done in my spiritual life and in my life in general that I don't want to get caught up in the tiny, minute details that will try to entangle me. If I get caught up, then I miss it. And I don't want to miss that message. The one that I've been praying for years and years and years. I don't want to miss it. What I also love about this beginning chapter is that Bhumi had a problem. And she goes to Lord Brahma with this problem. And she has tears in her eyes. And Lord Brahma doesn't say, well, let's not disturb God, I think you can handle it. Or at the same time, he also doesn't say, is your problem really as bad as you think it is? I mean, it could always be worse. I mean, there's another planet over there that has an issue too. Like, I think that could be a lot worse than your issue. No! Lord Brahma looked at it and said, right, you're right, there's an issue. Let's all go get help. And all of the other presiding deities of the other planets rallied around this one Earth planet and said, let's all go get help. It's not as though they didn't also have other planets with other inhabitants to care for. Everyone had their abode and their responsibilities, but they were able to come together and hear the problem of another person and understand that just as quickly as this is Earth's problem, this could become our problem. Better we go and solve this problem once and for all with some supreme help than simply putting it off for a later date thinking it's not my issue. So I was always struck by the camaraderie within the demigods. They were able to band together and see other people's problems as their problems. And they were able to pray for one another to solve that problem because they understood that in solving that problem, it would also solve their problems. So I feel as though this is something that we can all adopt a little bit of. It doesn't take anything away from us just to hear out somebody else's issue. And when we can't figure out what is the right thing to do for them or what is the wrong thing to do, and when we're understanding, you're like, I am not the controller, I don't even know how to solve your problem, we can hear them out and we can pray with them. This first chapter really drives home the point that this is so important, that we can hear each other out and we can pray with each other. Sometimes those prayers bring about a miracle that can save the entire world. And in saving the entire world, we also make steps towards saving the whole universe. So never underestimate the power of your prayers. And never underestimate the power of just hearing somebody out. Okay, the exact word used here is tatpriyartam, which means the demigods should appear on the earth in order to please the Lord. In other words, any living entity who lives only to satisfy the Lord can be understood to be a demigod. The demigods were further informed that the plenary portion of Lord Krishna, Ananta, who is maintaining the universal planets by extending his millions of hoods, would also appear on the earth before Lord Krishna's appearance. They were also informed that the external potency of Vishnu, Maya, with whom all the conditioned souls are enamored, would also appear, just to execute the purpose of the Supreme Lord. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, the word used is Vishnu Maya. So she is the illusory energy, but it is also said that she's just as good as Lord Vishnu, just as powerful. This is Mahamaya. This is Yoga Maya. This is the goddess Durga. And what we'll find is that goddess Durga actually appears as the sister of Sri Krishna. And so they are, and now, this is spoilers for keeping us engaged for the next chapters. They're twins, fraternal twins, our supreme most twins, which I always found was completely adorable. It's just the sweetest thing ever. It's just really cute. But she is in charge of this entire material creation. So when we think about Maya, and when we think about how strong Maya is, and when we think about, because this happens a lot in spiritual life, we start to blame our issues on Maya. We have to think about, who is this personality? And did she really do that? Or is this really my mind trying to take charge of things that I should not be in charge of? And it makes me feel better to be able to blame somebody else, somebody supreme, so that, it's not me, it's divine will. It's like, yeah, but you had the divine free will to be or not be a jerk. And we're like, yeah, no, but it wasn't me. It was divine will. And that other person's actions. You know, you ever see those memes on the internet where they're like how the different zodiac signs apologize? And one of those apologies is like, I'm sorry you made me act this way. Um, I feel like that's how we act with material nature. It's like, I'm sorry that you made me act this way. It's like, really? So all the different times that we try to not take accountability or responsibility for our actions, most of the time it is just us. Maya, her job is far reaching. Her rulership is far reaching, but her job is not that difficult. All she has to do is create the mind. And then all she has to do is create a connection with the mind that makes the living entity think, these thoughts, this mind, that's me. It's the end all be all of who I am. That's the extent of her job. There are spiritual teachers who have spent their lives writing commentaries and really dissertations about what this does and how this illusory material energy is so strong that she only has to do two things: create the mind, and then create that connection with the mind that makes us think, I am this. And if we go through our lives, we can think about how much struggle has come from that identification with I am this mind and these thoughts, because then the mind gets linked to whichever body we have at the time. And in linking with whichever body we have at the time, then we have I am this. I belong to this country. These people are my people, and those people are not my people. And that creates such a big struggle for us. Because ultimately, what are we really? We're souls. Souls who have been somehow or other, usually due to our own wishes and desires, we have been displaced, dislocated from our homes. And we're all just trying to get back. But the longer that we continue to grapple with the six senses, which include the mind, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, the further away we get from dropping in here, where all of those spiritual transmissions come from. So this Vishnu Maya, she's also going to appear just to execute the purpose of the Supreme Lord. So all those times where we think, oh, it's Maya's fault, it's material nature's fault, also, she's doing her job just for the purpose of the Supreme Lord. After instructing and pacifying all the demigods as well as Bhumi with sweet words, Lord Brahma, the father of all Prajapatis, or progenitors of universal population, departed for his own abode, the highest material planet called Brahmaloka. Now we hear about like Prajapatis or progenitors. Who uses this word progenitor? Right? It is an English word, but who even uses that? It basically means, the person who populates a place, a region, a planet. In this case, material existence. So Lord Brahma is the greatest of progenitors. So it was his idea, his job to make sure that there is a population. So then he departed for his own abode. And we'll hear about this word progenitors. We'll hear about the word progeny. We'll hear about all these things as we get into it. But I feel like Srila Prabhupada makes us really smart. He gives us all of those fancy words that when we use them in everyday language, people are like, wow, you must be really advanced. But really, we've just read books. The leader of the Yadu dynasty, King Shurasena, was ruling over the country known as Mathura, the district of Mathura, as well as the district known as Shurasena. On account of the rule of King Shurasena, Mathura became the capital city of all the kings of the Yadus. Mathura was also made the capital of the kings of the Yadu dynasty because the Yadus were a very pious family and knew that Mathura is the place where Lord Sri Krishna lives eternally, just as he also lives in Dwarka. Now we get to the good part. We've had some backstory. Now here we are. Once upon a time, Vasudev, the son of Shurasena, just after marrying Devaki, was going home on his chariot with his newly wedded wife. The father of Devaki, known as Devaka, had contributed a sufficient dowry because he was very affectionate toward his daughter. So now we hear of the idea of dowry, not out of some obligation, but out of affection. Let's see how far this king's affection goes. He had contributed hundreds of chariots, completely decorated with gold equipment. At that time, Kamsa, the son of Ugrasena, in order to please his sister Devaki, had voluntarily taken the reins of the horses of Vasudev's chariot and was driving. According to the custom of Vedic civilization, when a girl is married, the brother takes the sister and brother-in-law to their new home. Because the newly married girl may feel too much separation from her father's family, the brother goes with her until she reaches her father-in-law's house, so that she doesn't feel abandoned and she doesn't feel so lost. Her brother goes with her because her brother is a source of protection, a source of love and affection and peace. The full dowry contributed by Devak was as follows: 400 elephants, fully decorated with golden garlands. Golden garlands. 15,000 decorated horses, and 1,800 chariots. He also arranged for 200 beautiful girls to follow his daughter. The Kshatriya system of marriage, still current in India, dictates that when a Kshatriya is married, a few dozen of the bride's young girlfriends, in addition to the bride, go to the house of the king. Now, just for pronunciation's sake, when you see that KS, usually, depending upon what's happening, that K winds up being a little bit more silent. But it also depends on the region where you're from, because in Bengal, with a Bengali pronunciation, when you have a KS, they only pronounce the K and not the S. So that S with a dot underneath it means it's a sh sound, right? And then you have a K in front, which could be ksh, ksh. But if it's at the beginning of a word, it kind of feels a little bit cumbersome to say kshatriya, which you can do. When you get into how these verses are all sung, sometimes there's a vowel that comes before it, and then you get the pronunciation of that little K in front. For Bengali people, the way that they pronounce with their dialect, the way that they pronounce it, that KS, they only pronounce the K and not the S. And so sometimes if you listen to a lecture, you'll hear Srila Prabhupada say Katriya instead of Kshatriya. And you might wonder, why? What's happening? And if you go back into the history of ISKCON, the first generation, when you get into the 70s and 60s, and you hear any of them give lectures, they'll often also say Kshatriya, because they're pronouncing it from Srila Prabhupada, who was Bengali. And so the Bengali pronunciation is that K and not the SH. Why? It's just Bengali. So if you ever hear it, Bengalis will also, they will refer to like Lakshmi. It becomes Lucky. So if you see places in like Bengal and Kolkata, you get like a lucky road. It's like lucky, really. What is this deal with like lucky? It sounds like an English word, but it's not. Usually you'll get Lakshmi, but it gets mixed up according to Bengali language and different dialects and how these things are pronounced all throughout the subcontinent. You'll also hear in South India things get pronounced differently, but South Indian people tend to be very, very, very intense about pronunciation. They get very fierce about their pronunciation. So you'll see there'll be fluctuations. Similarly, when you hear of the name Hiranyaksha, and he also has this KS business going on, you'll hear Hiranyaksha, which you'll hear sometimes Srila Prabhupada would have pronounced Hiranyaka, because you've got that KSH rule that Bengalis kind of, they say it differently. So there's like puppet shows, there's different classes, and you'll hear it pronounced differently, and you think, why? What is the deal with this first generation? But it's just different pronunciations according to where you are within India. Likewise, in Jagannath Puri and Odisha and different parts, the R in Krishna, right, there's a dot underneath it. And according to Devanagari script, this makes a R sound. But depending upon where you are, that sound can sound differently. So even sometimes, according to people in Gujarat, people in Odisha, that R comes with an RU. So that dot underneath the R, if you look at Krishna book, right, the actual transliteration, Krishna is just spelled Krsna. And sometimes you might be thinking, now, how in the world does that spell Krishna? There are not enough vowels. In fact, you don't even get a vowel till the end. What is this word where K-R-S-N-A, seriously? And that Krishna, you're like, what? It's because that dot under the R makes a R sound. But sometimes, according to where you are, it makes a R sound. So if you go to Puri, you'll hear people, they say Krishna. And you can think like, isn't that wrong? It's like, no, it's just a difference in dialect. It's just a slight difference. But what I love is that our Supreme Person doesn't discount anybody for their strict pronunciation or their different dialects of pronunciation. He knows who you're calling. So if you are from a place that says Krishna, and now you get here and we're saying Krishna, and now you're thinking, but shouldn't there just be one standard? And shouldn't everybody just say it the same way? It's like, Krishna understands. Krishna understands. Let's not, don't fight about it. Don't get caught up in the fight. Because then that's how we miss it. Instead, we can just call out with all our hearts in the best pronunciation we can. Even if you don't get all the pronunciation right, Krishna understands. Even if you say it differently from somebody else who may say it some other way, Krishna understands. I heard a devotee, and he was from Spain. And Spain, for anyone who doesn't know, there's a little bit of a lisp in the language on the S's. And so because he's from Spain, and he was pronouncing Krishna and different things with that little bit of an S, a lisp on the S. Now somebody could think, now, isn't that incorrect? You should be pronouncing it exactly. Krishna knows. Krishna understands. Krishna gets it. So no matter where you are, in whichever part of the world you find yourself, no matter what your pronunciation is like, the goal is just keep trying. Just keep calling out with your heart. And our Supreme Person will get it. So that's just, a little bit on language and pronunciation. So Kshatriyas. When a Kshatriya is married, and I remember I was in global history class. I think it was in like 9th grade or something. And our history teacher decided to delve into different, world history because that was his job. And he came to India and he came to talking about the caste system. And he had Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, and he'd written it on the blackboard, which at that time, I think the blackboard was actually like reddish or something. So he'd written it on the board. And he sat there for like 2-3 minutes. Like he had been, he had gone to the lesson up until that point and then was sitting there and he was like, okay, so we've got Brahmanas who are the teachers of society. And then he came to the word Kshatriya, and this man looked so dumbfounded for a long time. Just really, like he literally was just kind of like scratching his head. And he's like, guys, I'm going to butcher this. I have no idea how to do this. So if this is offensive, don't worry about it. He's like, I'm lost. And it took so much because I was really, 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 really shy. It took so much within me to like finally like raise my hand and help this poor guy out and be like, it's Kshatriya. Because he was trying to like figure, he's going with like Kshatriya. He was trying to do all kinds. I was like, it's Kshatriya. It's super simple sorry. But it was like me having to come out of my shell to help somebody with this Sanskrit pronunciation. Oh man. Whew. So you can, I still remember it to this day. And I'm no longer in 9th grade. So that'll let you know how big of an impact it made on me. But this is what we're here for in See-Through, to try and help each other out. Get us through even the Sanskrit pronunciations when we're looking at each other like, so what do we say here? What are we doing? So not only did he send elephants with golden garlands and horses and chariots, but he sent 200 beautiful girls. So if you're ever wondering how, like if you've ever seen a movie and you're like, this princess has all these friends, where did these friends come from? Sometimes the friends come with the princess. She comes fully equipped, even with friends. The followers of the queen are called maidservants, but actually they act as friends of the queen. This practice is prevalent from time immemorial, traceable at least to the time before the advent of Lord Krishna 5,000 years ago. So Vasudeva brought home another 200 beautiful girls along with his wife. While the bride and bridegroom were passing along on the chariot, there were different kinds of musical instruments playing to indicate the auspicious moment. There were conch shells, bugles, drums and kettle drums, Combined together, they were vibrating a nice concert. The procession was passing very pleasingly, and Kamsa was driving the chariot, when suddenly there was a miraculous sound vibrated from the sky, which especially announced to Kamsa, Kamsa, you are such a fool. You are driving the chariot of your sister and your brother-in-law, but you do not know that the eighth child of this sister will kill you. And we'll leave it at a cliffhanger, because I like cliffhangers. So now we have a miraculous voice from this guy telling poor Kamsa, who's not really poor, he's rich and also a bit of a jerk, that the eighth child of his sister will kill him. So, now that's a good question, right? Our friend Leela Mandri is saying, anybody else feel bad for the families of the 200 girls? No. So what would happen is, this was actually a lineage. So those 200 girls had been born to other people that served within the kingdom. So it's not like they had to go abduct people. It's like you have a cook and you have a certain so-and-so, and then they have a child, right? And then those children, they all grow up and whatnot. And the biggest thing was to be like a lady in waiting. So that would be the equivalent. You hear in English terms, you hear all these ladies in waiting, and that was a very prestigious position to have, right? It wasn't like you were just abandoned. So not only would Vasudev as king provide for Devaki, but also these 200 girls. It's not like they were like, like, oh, you get to live in poverty. No. They had a separate space within the palatial complex just for them. And they were able to have families. So it's not like their only function was to live like servant girls. Yes, they were maidservants, but these maidservants, they were specifically friends of the queen. So, and they had people within the palace complex. Like you've got gardeners, you've got all these people, when we look at these palaces, they encompass so much. So they had people who were serving there within the palace compound who were almost like family. So you got landscapers and gardeners, and you've got people who maintain the grounds, and people who are just there to maintain the waters on the ground, people who are just there to decorate, people who are just there to cook, and they would all have families. And in the course of having these families, they'd have these children. And when you had all of these girls, what would happen is they would also grow up with the princess. So these 200 girls were not girls that she didn't know. She'd grown up with them, and that's why they were going with her, so that she didn't feel so far away from home. Does that answer your question? Perfect. I hope we don't feel bad for them anymore, because it wasn't like a deplorable situation. It wasn't a situation where you had to feel bad. And even we hear in Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto that Shudras, right? We think about Shudras as like street sweepers and all of these people who have to do the manual labor. And they are categorized on a lower rung of society, just based on kind of their learning and their capacity for learning. But these Shudras were not always living, it's not like they were living in squalor. They were actually perfectly taken care of by the government and heads of society. So it's not like their homes where it's like, oh, totally bereft. Everything is terrible. Shudras in this society that was supposed to be working more ideally than it does today, Shudras were not people that you just put on the side and said, you are a lower rung of society and we forget about you. No, they were an integral part of society. It's like saying, oh my gosh, you have a job as a sanitation worker? I can't give you any respect. It's like, whoa, but you do, because if it doesn't happen, like if the garbage doesn't get picked up on Tuesdays and Fridays, everybody's outraged. And so sanitation workers actually get paid a lot. And they should be. They're dealing with all of our crap, literally. So, when we see these different categorizations of society, one, it's actually natural. Somebody's got to do it. Like, there's jobs, somebody's got to do them. And there were people willing to take up these jobs. And as reciprocation, the government heads were saying, we reciprocate with you for taking up this thankless task. all of these manual jobs and the building roads and doing all of these things, but they actually gave them honor according to their capacities and the jobs that they did. So this was a government administration organization where they were not just looking to rule over and oppress people and then uphold the people in a better class of society. They were trying to understand that everybody has their natural place in society and that they should be reciprocated with according to that place in society and given honor according to that space within society. So Srila Prabhupada says that even the Shudras they were living happily, but also they knew that if they had a problem, they could go to the king. It was supposed to be a situation where they could go to the king and say, I have a problem. And the king says, okay, I care. Let me do something about it. Instead of kings now where they're like, look, your personal problem is not my issue. Like, you've got to go to somebody else for that. You need a social worker for that or something. Like, because and I'm like, are the government officials not actually supposed to be social workers also? Who else should work for society if not the government officials? So this is a time where kingdoms and administrative governments worked a little bit differently. We will see some correlations between what we have today and what was back then. Usually those are the demoniac kingdoms, though. The sucky part is usually they were the kingdoms that needed the most reform. But we'll see how this works out. And voices from the sky. Yeah, there are some interesting happenings. Anybody hear a voice from the sky lately? No? Like, I feel like we've lost that voice from the spiritual intercom when they like, attention, it's a PSA, but just for you, Kamsa. You're driving the chariot of your sister. Did you know the eighth child's gonna kill you? Like, and then it fades out. That's all. No, like, I don't know if you want to do anything about that. Let me just put this information right here just for you. And Kamsa had spent a lot of his time, we hear from Garga Samhita and other spiritual literatures, he'd spent a lot of his time conquering other people. He goes and he conquers a whole bunch of other demons, which we will hear about later on. So remind me we'll backtrack on that. We have a takeaway. So our takeaway from the birthday woman. My main takeaway for today is have faith that the message will arrive. Our prayers are being heard. The answers are coming. Maybe not the way we expected or wanted them to come, but it is coming. We just have to keep praying and exercising our faith. That reminded me of something you said a while ago in the Mahabharata series, which we should continue and put up. That Krishna deserves the benefit of the doubt. So maybe he's not ignoring our prayers. Yes, maybe he's working his magic in our favor. And that also reminded me of Bhagavad Gita 5:26, when Krishna talks about the constant endeavor for perfection that assures us of liberation in the very near future. So maybe the constant endeavor to pray, to surrender, to have faith is enough. Maybe all we need to do is keep going and keep choosing faith. That is perfectly summed up. You took the whole hour and did a perfect summary. I don't even know how you did that, but I'm so grateful for you. Isn't it just perfect? It's so perfect. It's exactly everything. So yeah, maybe our job is not to save the world, but maybe our job is to save the world by we keep going and we keep choosing faith. And then we give our friend the benefit of the doubt that when he says in this endeavor there is no loss or diminution, that really in this endeavor there is no loss, no diminution. Doesn't take anything from you to pray for a friend, but it does give the absolute most. Gives the greatest and best results. It's like the best return on our investment that we could ever have. So let's see. From YouTube, we have one takeaway from dear Ashi, who is always super active, which I really appreciate. Thank you. Prayer is everything, and prayer is enough. If there's anything that we can know from today is that prayer is everything, and prayer is enough. So we should never think, that's it, that's all I can do. That's everything. You're doing everything. So thank you for being with me. We will pick up from our cliffhanger and we will see what Kamsa will do. There's another one with tricky pronunciation. You get Kamsa. That dot over the M sometimes makes a sound, which is like a N in the back of your throat. So yeah, you hear Kamsa. But then also sometimes if you watch anything Hindi related, they'll say Kansa. And you're like, why? It's because that M with the dot over it actually does make a bit of an N sound. We see this a lot in Nrsinga, right? His name is spelled with an M. You might think, you're like, why? Because that M with the dot over it, we have different letters in Devanagari. In the language of the gods, we have different letters and different sounds. But we'll get there. We'll see each other through. Shameless plug for the name of this podcast. So thank you for being with me. We started at 10:08. We'll end it at 11:08 because still great auspicious times. And for that, I have to keep this stretched for just another minute. So I want to say thank you all for joining. All glories to all of you. In the beginning, I said a prayer to all the assembled Vaishnavs, which is all of you. Literally, it's all of you. I'm so grateful for all of you that you come each week, and we're eager and ready to hear it and ready to be with one another. So that now I can stop speaking because now it's 11:08, and if I keep talking, it'll be 11:09, and that will defeat the purpose of me stretching this to the auspicious time. All of you have the most auspicious day. I'll see you all again next week.